on behalf of your client.
Thank you, Your Honor. I will note for the record that we fully briefed this and submitted a sentencing memorandum, as did the state, prior to this hearing, and I know the court's had time to review that. We'll rely mostly on that for sure, but there are some obvious points I want to bring up here today. I think the court's familiar enough with this case, and I think we all agree that the person that stands before you today is far, far different than the person who committed these acts. And if folks showed up today expecting us to stand up or expected me to argue in a sentencing memorandum that the victims are in any way to blame for this, you're not going to get it. There was never an intent on Rebecca's part to cause the death of these individuals. That may be hard for some to believe, but I think it's important to take into context what was going on in our city, particularly at that time. We had rampant use of very heavy narcotics, fentanyl just being one of them. We had a record number of fentanyl deaths going around. And why do I bring that up? Well, there were folks using fentanyl that never expected to pass away for it. And that's important to note because these casual users were dying just as regularly as the everyday users. Rebecca was in a environment, and all the reports bear this out, that was full of sexual exploitation, drug abuse, mental abuse, physical abuse. And I don't mean by the hands of any of these victims. I want to make that clear. That's not what I'm up there arguing. This was her life, though, for decades. There's an individual that I didn't hear mentioned today. I know him by the nickname Blue. This whole investigation started into this individual. We have to call it what it is. I'm not blaming him for the deaths either, but to say that he didn't have a part in this is ridiculous. Rebecca was trafficked by him. She was physically abused by him. The detectives, when they were investigating him, that's where this ultimately came out, was during an interview with her regarding the abuse that he had occasioned upon her. Why should the court consider that in sentencing Rebecca? Because it's important to not forget the context in which all of these took place. Without assigning blame to other people, I don't have to assign blame to anybody else. Rebecca, on 3 different occasions, at least 3 different occasions, to law enforcement agencies and personnel, along with psychologists, admitted what she did. She admitted what she did. In fact, that's so relevant to this case that without question, after reviewing the discovery over the past 2 years, and the state did an excellent job of investigating the case, we had lots and lots of different pieces of evidence in this particular case. I'll stand here here today and say, if she had not confessed to these, you guys aren't getting justice at all. You guys are not getting justice at all. It was her admitting that she had drugged these guys such that they would pass out and she stole their stuff. This would have been a very difficult case for the state to make. Now, that's coming from a defense standpoint, but I've done a few of these. And all of these were marked as accidental deaths. All of these were obviously, and I'll use this for context, in a part of our town where people were dropping dead like flies during 2023, like flies from fentanyl overdoses. These guys would have never stood out otherwise, but for, ultimately, the statements made by my client. There were others involved in this too. It's not up to me to point the finger at, bring their names into the courtroom, or otherwise. I do mention the nickname Blue because she was a prisoner to him for years and years. He provided the drugs. He told her where the clients were. He took proceeds, kept her under control by keeping her addicted to, of all things, fentanyl, amongst a wide range of other things. She had multiple overdoses herself before the first of these, before she was actually arrested on this, just the week prior. That doesn't excuse her crimes, but we're not here for excuses. She pled guilty. She's taken the blame, all on herself. But it is my job to offer the court mitigation when it's deciding a sentence. If you look at the sentencing guidelines, a couple of throwaways, very little prior record. And there was one contact with the court prior to this horrible set of incidents. And I say it's a throwaway because the state acknowledged that in their sentencing memorandum. And I don't want to go back through the sentencing memorandums. That was for the court, and the court's read those. But again, it goes back to the person that you're sentencing just isn't the person who committed these crimes. And I think a big thing in all of these sentences, and I've done a couple dozen death penalty cases, and I've done them to the point where I have to stand up in front of a jury when somebody's been convicted of aggravated murder of multiple people. I've done it a dozen times where I've had to stand up and mitigate towards the lowest sentence, which was still a life tail, 25 to life. Done it over and over again. And been successful at that. Rebecca's in a different situation because she was not charged with a purposeful murder. She was charged with felony murder. She was charged with causing the death of another while committing another of listed felonies, felonious assault, robbery, etc. I believe the court has to take into consideration the person that she was at the time she committed these crimes as opposed to the person she is now, and contrast the two. I was able to provide the court with an extensive mitigation report. And again, I say that knowing this court well enough that it's been through that. This wasn't something that started in 2023 with Rebecca. That is her addiction, her being sex trafficked. This goes all the way back to age 12. All documented, and we provided that documentation to the court. Your Honor, regardless of what the court does today, and everybody I hope understands this, she's getting a life sentence. She is going to prison for life. The decision the court is making is when will she be eligible for parole. To tag a number on each individual victim, I understand the state's argument there. I get it, expected it. But for each individual, she will be serving necessarily a life sentence. It's whether or not the court decides to run any or all of the parole eligibility terms concurrent. Your Honor, we're not asking for sympathy today. We are asking the court to consider the sentencing from a viewpoint of empathy. And without discussing, which again, I tried to do much more fully in my sentencing memorandum, without discussing the nature and environment in which these crimes happened, how could anybody, including this court, expect to take an empathetic view towards Rebecca? That is essentially putting yourself in her shoes and what was happening with her during that period of time. She's done excellent at the jail. That wasn't originally the case. She had extreme mental trauma, PTSD, suicidal behavior. And I mention that because I don't want to say it was always smooth road at the jail. Absolutely not. But the court is, I believe, aware of the fact that in the last year or so, the change has been dramatic. She's a trusted inmate. She's a runner. She's been a viable resource for other inmates, primarily female, that find themselves in the exact same situation, albeit probably not charged with murder, but that come from the streets similar to the way she has. She's been and I'm not getting this from Rebecca, I'm getting this from other inmates and from other people at the county jail. She has been a guiding light for some of those individuals who are now out and free and hopefully not, or hopefully heeding Rebecca's advice. She still has value. She had value back then when she was not a victim of these crimes. She's the one who occasioned these crimes. But she was out there as a victim, no question about it. Again, empathy, not sympathy. She has value. She still has value. She will have value when she goes to begin her life sentence here in a couple of weeks, whenever they come and get her. That's already happening. That happened the day she pled that she was going to receive a life sentence. I would go back and end with the sentencing factors as far as remorse, because I completely, having done this for so long and having lost loved ones of my own, completely understand the urge or hesitation for anybody sitting on this side of the courtroom to want to appreciate or understand any form of remorse from somebody standing on this side of the courtroom in this chair, standing at this chair. I get that. Get it all the time. This isn't something she's just demonstrated for the court, or will be in a minute, because she's got a letter she would like to read to the court, an allocution of sorts. This isn't something that just came up in the last 2 months as we're preparing for sentencing. I would argue to the court that this started back when law enforcement first contacted her and were interviewing her as to build a case against her abuser. I think pimp's too nice of a word for the guy. It was her abuser. When you confess to something, you are necessarily showing remorse. You just are. Because to admit that you did something wrong says that you realize you did something wrong. And then to continue to give more details about what you did wrong shows to me an appreciation for what you did. And this is somebody who has scattered memories over years and years and years of, again, physical abuse, mental health problems, documented, not made up by a defense attorney, and a person whose drug use was so extreme, she's overdosed dozens of times in her life. So these are scattered, cloudy memories. But she reached for them, and she told authorities what happened, putting herself, quite frankly, in a very bad position when it comes to defending her case. She said what happened. I would argue that's remorse. And I know that this court in the state of Ohio, I don't think would argue that it's not common for a case like this to where we have such detail given, such an acceptance of responsibility for her actions. And again, don't take my word for it. Court will hear from Ms. Auburn in a minute. Concurrent sentences. There was an old judge in this courthouse who said, "Mark, shut up and tell me what you're asking for." We're asking for concurrent sentences. Again, concurrent life sentences. It's only a question of when she'll be eligible for parole. And when she goes to a parole board, she's going to go to the parole board with 4 murders, having pled to and confessed to 4 murders and a felonious assault. And don't think for a second they don't look on the original indictment at the parole board and see what she was originally indicted for. So there's all those other charges too that are relevant conduct and can be considered upon a parole evaluation. She's going to have to face that at some point or another. We're asking the court to consider, again, from the standpoint of who Ms. Auburn was at the time she committed these offenses versus who she is now. Consider the fact that there is a reformation aspect to sentencing. It's unlikely she'll make parole. I would agree with that. I've advised her of that before she took the plea. Again, there's 4 murders and a felonious assault victim out there. But I don't know what the stance of the parole board is going to be in whatever that would be, 12 or 15 years. She needs to work towards that. And I would argue it's better for society if we've got somebody who is working towards something to make themselves better, such that if they are awarded parole, they are a much better contributor to society. Not only that, but certainly all of us know in our jobs, there are good deeds that are done inside prisons. There just are. There are people that become, I'll use the same term that I heard from a deputy inside the jail, a guiding light for others who have taken the wrong path, for sure. And I'll just say this, regardless of what the court does today, that will be Rebecca. She's proven that. I visited this client probably more than I visited probably any client I've ever had, so I do know this person. She's always been contrite, scared. Of course she's scared. Who wouldn't be? Never once did I get her blaming the individuals who lost their lives. Never once. Any of that would have come from me from reviewing discovery. Never once did I get that from Rebecca. Not one single time. Your Honor, with that, you know what we're asking for. I know you've considered all the materials I submitted prior to the day's date. I would just ask the court to entertain allowing Rebecca, essentially this would be an allocution if this was a death penalty case. Thank you.
Do you want to make an argument about costs and fines and discuss jail time credit?
Thank you, Your Honor. At jail time credit, I believe we agreed upon, I'm saying it off the top of my head, 902. 902. Fines and, I'm sorry.
902, Your Honor, you gave that. It depends on how you've structured this sentence versus the one you gave the jail time credit to. So, but yeah, she has been on this case for 902 days.
Thank you.
Your Honor, as to that, where you put it, we did the jail time credit calculated from the time she was arrested on the warrant on this case. So I would argue 902 is the appropriate assignment of jail time credit if it's not being stipulated to. At any rate, as to fines and costs, yeah, I need to address it. She was indigent before she came in here, without question. Read the reports. She's indigent as she's been locked up. She will be indigent for the rest of her life. I'm an appointed counsel in this case. I would ask the court to consider waiving fines and costs as to that. Thank you. And with that, I would ask the court to
Thank you.
yeah.